Welcome back to Hazel Jane Tarot. Today I am bringing you my VR to Simon at the Hermit's Cave, which is my top 5 tarot decks of 2020. When I had a look at the 15 tarot decks that I have got so far this year, and obviously there's a bit of caution with this in the sense that Christmas hasn't come and gone yet, and I know I have 2 more decks that I've ordered that haven't arrived yet. The beautiful Korea Tarot is on its way, and the Modern Love Tarot by Ethany is due to be released sometime over the next month or so it might even arrive in 2020. So they could have potentially been favourites, but when I looked at the 15 decks I bought this year, only 3 of them were actually released as new decks in 2020. And so I'm actually going to start off with those 3 decks. But then I have a few other ways of looking at this top 5 that I'm going to look into as well. So without further ado, my number 1 deck that was new, released in 2020, that I got this year is the Painted Tarot by Sophie McKay Knight. So this is an independently produced deck. Sophie McKay Knight is an artist. She's based in Edinburgh in Scotland, and this deck was gifted to me for my birthday. But so the backs are apparently the floor underneath the easel where she painted these images. It's quite a chunky deck, and the cardstock is quite maybe a little cardboardy. Some people might find it, but it's easy enough to shuffle. But I do take care of it with it being, such a lovely deck. I haven't read with it that much, but it's probably my favorite of the ones that I have that are new, that came new to me, but also new to the world in 2020. So it's really painterly, as you can see. It's very based on the Rider-Waite-Smith images. I have done like an unboxing, I think, of this on my channel, where I've gone through the cards in more detail and given more of my impressions, but it's a really lovely, colourful, figurative tarot deck, and it reads quite nicely. The artist, she had a long history of reading tarot and studying tarot before she undertook this project, and I liked the 3 of this is the 2 of Wands. I like the 3 of Wands in this deck so much that I actually ordered an art print from the artist as well. So this is the Painted Tarot, and I haven't seen that much of it. I think maybe some of the collectors outside of the UK have been a bit reluctant to order, maybe with the shipping, international shipping. So it doesn't come with a book, it just comes with that little pamphlet. But because it's based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system, it's pretty easy to read if you're familiar with that. So that is the Painted Tarot, which would be my number 1, new out in 2020 and new to me as well. Number 2, in my new out in 2020 and also new to me, is the Shimmering Veil Tarot by Cilla Conway, and I know this appeared in quite a few other top 5s that I've watched as well. So this is a very different deck from the kind of thing that I normally go for, because it's much more abstract, and the paintings really seem kind of like channeled pieces of art that represent the archetypes. There's just a little symbol, so like that's the 3 of Wands, so the 3 of fire. And I haven't really read with the deck at all yet. I think it's a deck that will be quite sometimes challenging and quite deep and even spiritual to work with. This card is maybe one of my favorites in the deck. It is absolutely gorgeous, this Empress. And mine had become damaged. There was like a line down it here, so I ordered a second copy of this card from Cilla as a replacement. So yes, it's quite an intense deck, and I wouldn't say it's a particularly easy beginner deck. For me, this is at the very edge of my comfort zone in terms of reading. Love that one as well. It's another favourite card in the deck, the Star. It's at the edge of my comfort zone in terms of my reading, because it is more abstract, and I think it will be one really for, self-reflection and journaling. It does come with a substantial guidebook with a page of information for each card. Nice soft cover guidebook. So that is a great deck. It's another independently produced deck, and it was a treat to myself around the time of my birthday as well. So a lot of these decks, my birthday's in August, a lot of these decks have come to me in the latter part of the year. And then the third deck that I have that was new out this year, so this is the three in my top three of new to me and new this year, is the Tarot of the Divine, which I know is in a lot of other people's top 5 as well. So this deck is by Yoshi Tani, and it's a mass market deck, and a few other people have observed that it's incredibly good value for the deck that you get for the price. It's quite a chunky deck. People describe this as linen cardstock. It's a bit kind of textured, like the Game of Thrones tarot has a similar sort of cardstock. So this deck is called the Tarot of the Divine. I personally feel like it would be better named something like the Storyteller's Tarot, or something like that, because there are some cards that deal with divine figures, gods and goddesses from different cultures, but most of the cards deal with fairy tales, and I'm not sure if the fairy tales and myths sit comfortably beside the divine figures who are the subject of religious belief of people in different countries and cultures. So that I'm not 100% keen on with this deck. And the other thing, but the thing that I do really love is that it covers a huge number of different cultures. The art is lovely, and it comes with a storybook. Well, you have to buy separately a storybook called Beneath the Moon. And the stories, there's like a 1-page summarized version of each story that comes from this, or each of these images are based on. And I think you get a lot more out of the deck having read the stories in Beneath the Moon. There is a little bit of information in the guidebook, which is in colour, but as you can see, it's just very limited information, and you would have to maybe take this and go online and read a bit more about some of these stories. How they fit with the individual tarot card, again, some are very comfortable fits, and some are, for me, maybe having read Beneath the Moon, the reason that they were chosen is sometimes really obvious and sometimes less so. But it's a lovely deck to work with. I've only read with it a few times, but it is really nice, and I will be reading with it more in future. So that was my third of my top 3 rather than top 5 decks of 2020 that are new in 2020 and also new to me. Now, when I originally sat down to do this video, this is the second time I've shot it, I had filmed just my top 5 decks that were new to me in 2020, and those 3 actually didn't make it into my top 5. So I'm going to continue, and this is now going to be my top 5 new to me decks in 2020. So as I said, I have 15 new tarot decks this year, and this was supposed to be a depth year. It was supposed to be a depth year. I wasn't planning to buy any decks. And in fact, my first deck purchase was an Oracle deck that I bought in June. So I made it nearly halfway through the year. And then let's just say that pandemic retail therapy was responsible for quite a lot. And I'm going to share with you some of the really exciting new decks that I have bought this year. That are in my top 5 new decks of 2020 for me. So first of all, we have the Spirit Keeper's Tarot by Benabel Wen. This is the first edition, and this is not new in 2020. I think this came out in 2018, I'm guessing. Yes, 2018. And this first edition was very limited run. There were only 1,000 made initially, and I was not fortunate enough to get one ordered when they first came out. And on the open market, this deck has been selling at very high prices between collectors. I am very fortunate because the lovely Julie at Peekaboo Rose, and I have posted a video about getting this deck as well. Julie was open to selling me her copy of the deck because Benabel is bringing out a third edition in 2021 that Julie was planning to get. And while I have the Vitruvian edition, I had been pining over this black and white first edition, and so Julie offered to sell it to me, and I bought it. And this was my first experience of buying a tarot deck from someone else within the community, and sending the money to them by PayPal and then posting the deck to me. And it was a lovely experience, and it makes this deck a little bit special to know that it belonged to Julie. Julie has such great energy. I love watching her channel. And when you get a deck and you're sort of cleansing it for yourself, knowing that it's come from Benabel's hands to Julie's hands to my hands is actually quite nice energy to have attached to a tarot deck. So yes, this is the beautiful and mysterious and study worthy. I have the 22-week course to work on with this, and I have the book of maps, the very large guidebook that goes with it to look at as well, the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. But this was the most expensive deck I've ever bought, and such an exciting new acquisition for my tarot collection. So this is a deck I'm going to be reading with, and I'm just over the moon to have. I keep looking at it up there on the shelf. So yes, that is one of my top 5 new decks of 2020. Another really exciting new deck for me this year was the Tarot of the Cloisters. Now, this is an out of print deck. It was mass market from US Games, and it was published in 1993. Now, I wanted a round tarot deck, and looking at images of all the different round tarot decks that there are online, this was the one that appealed to me the most. But because it's out of print, it's very hard to get. And some of the, I want to show you the backs. Some of the copies that were changing hands on, say, eBay were priced out of my price range. And I came across this in a list of somebody's decks for sale. The seller was in Belgium, in a buy-sell trade group on Facebook. And so I approached the seller, and I PayPal'd the money to the seller, and they sent me the deck. So this was my second online purchase and my first purchase through a buy-sell trade group. So that was pretty exciting, and waiting with bated breath, was it going to arrive? And it did, and the deck has not disappointed. It's based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system, and they're all done in this lovely the art looks like stained glass windows in a church, which gives the sort of overall feel like a gives a deck that sort of sacred feel, I suppose, as somebody who would have gone to churches with stained glass windows as a kid. It's a very brightly coloured deck mostly. There's a lot of blues, as you can see. So when it's set out in a spread, it has a nice brightly coloured rainbowy feel to it. And because it's a round deck, what I wanted this for really was to start working with and experimenting with the rotation of the card when it's dealt. So there's no way to keep them all up the same way. And you could just deal them out and turn them upright when you pull your cards. But I want to work with, having reversals, but also waxing and waning energy depending on which way it's rotated. So I've done one reading with it like that so far, and it was actually really interesting I did it for the month of December. So I'm going to be reading with this deck a lot more, and I was just so excited. Like, that's 2 decks that were on my wish list that I thought were almost impossible to get for me, that I have managed to get in 2020. So that has been really, really exciting. My third deck in my top 5 new to me of 2020 is another deck that I never thought I would have, and that is the 1972 Blushing Fool Rider-Waite-Smith. So as you can see, I've more than I ever did before this year, I have spent a bit of money on out-of-print decks. And in this case, a deck that I never really thought I would particularly want. I hadn't been seeking it out. I wasn't stalking any decks on eBay or anything like that. But I came across this in a charity shop, and I have posted a little video about getting this deck as well. I came across it in a charity shop in Belfast, and it was for sale at, again, it wasn't cheap because they knew it was a vintage deck, but it was more affordable than what I've seen it sell at on eBay and so on. So I decided to go for it once I'd sort of done a little checking to make sure that it was what I thought it was. And this deck makes me like the Rider-Waite-Smith a lot more than I had done previously. I have up until now really used my Rider-Waite-Smith as a study deck. I have the Centennial is the only other version of this deck that I have. And I mean, as I'm flicking through and showing you the images, you've seen these images before. I like the coloration of this printing. They're quite nice and light. It has a really light quality. The line work is fine, and the colours are like the blues are just a really nice light shade. The thing though that really stands out for me with this printing, apart from the fact that it is the blushing fool, like there, even the Emperor's got a wee sunburn. It'll probably take me too long to find the fool for you now. There he is. So apart from it being the sort of the iconic blushing fool, and it's nice to have that in my collection, is the cardstock. The cardstock is just absolutely, the feel of it is just lovely. As you can see, it's totally matte, and it's just really smooth. I don't know how printers today can't make their cards like this. I'm so lucky as well to have got a deck in such pristine condition. I mean, the edges aren't even dirty. This seems like a deck that lay in a box just and wasn't really used for a long time. So this is the 1972 Rider-Waite-Smith, and that is in my top 3 of most exciting and wonderful new decks that I have got this year. So the other 2 that I'm going to show you are not out of print. One of the other new decks I got this year is the Afro Goddess Tarot Arcanas. And unlike the 3 that I've shown you there in my top 5 of new decks, this is a deck that I have actually used quite a lot. I got this sort of, again, around the time of my birthday in August, and I have used it for about a month and a half of daily draws and reading for others and reading for my week ahead and those kinds of readings. You can see the beautiful sparkle on the gold gilding. This is one of the most lovely tactile experiences to work with, this deck. It, as you can see, the cards are quite large, and it has this lovely glossy back design with the pattern and then this silhouette of the outline of the continent of Africa. And this deck, sorry, I didn't say the creator, is by Andrea Furtick, who I believe is an American creator. And this deck is available from her website, which I will try to remember to link below. I bought it within the UK from Little Red Tarot, which retails independently produced decks. So in terms of cardstock, the feel of these cards is beautiful. Havana at Sparkle Divine Tarot described it as like nearly like touching skin. And I think that is one of the best descriptions I can think of for the cardstock, because with it being shiny on one side and then this beautiful matte on the other side, the cards slide past each other really beautifully. So this deck ticks a huge number of boxes for me in terms of what I like in a tarot deck. It's really bright and colourful. It's painted, so you can see sort of the painterly quality and the hand of the artist. There's like that coherent vision of the artist, kind of came up with a concept, wrote the book to go with it. It has that lovely coherent vision of how it's been put together. It's figurative, it's Rider-Waite-Smith based, and the facial expressions of the characters and the way they are painted, it's just lovely to work with. I used it, as I say, for about a month and a half, and I only put it away because I felt like I wanted to use another deck. but like I didn't want to stop using this deck, if that makes sense. This is one of my favorite cards. The men in this deck are really beautifully drawn. They have like this is the Emperor, you know, so they have a real strength and physicality, but they also have a gentle quality as well, a sort of softness to their gaze, which feels like a really wonderful depiction of divine masculine, alongside the goddesses of the divine feminine figures that are depicted. And as you can see, you know, the modern dress, and they're just they're just beautiful. I mean, it's just a gorgeous deck. So this has been one of my favorites on two fronts in 2020. It's one of my top 5 of the new decks that I have got in my collection, but it's also been one of the decks that I have read with and enjoyed reading with the most. And another deck that is new to me in 2020 that I have really enjoyed reading with is the Modern Witch Tarot by Lisa Sterle. So this is a mass market deck. It's produced by Liminal 11, so it's available in lots of places. And this was given to me for my birthday, and it wasn't a deck that I had on a wish list, and I kind of was surprised by how much I loved it. So I've done a review of this deck on my website, on my channel. I mean, it's a real chunk of a deck. It's a really thick deck. I mean, even it's sort of similar to the Afro Tarot Arcanas, yeah. Similar sort of width or thickness, but it's standard tarot size cards. I love that back design, and I just love the way the color is applied in this deck as well. And it has this lovely slippery slidey cardstock that is just a delight to shuffle. Really, really lovely to shuffle, and it fans beautifully. So this is another deck that I used for about a month, and I didn't want to stop working with it at the end of that month. This card is one of my favorites, actually. I love the family that's depicted, and the way the colors applied there in the sky is just so lovely to look at. So the Modern Witch Tarot, you may have come across it before. It's all female deck. It's very modern in terms of the clothing of the characters, but the scenes depicted are very much based straight from the Rider-Waite Smith. I really love the diversity of people that are depicted in this deck in many different ways. Like there's a diversity of presentation, like how women dressed in lots of different ways. There's diversity of skin tone, and so on. But one thing there's not a huge amount of age diversity in this deck, but I have found that not put me off. Even though all these women are younger than me, that hasn't put me off at all. I have really loved working with this. It reads beautifully. It's just a really, really lovely tarot deck, and was one of my top 5 of my new decks of 2020, but it's also been one of my top 5 decks to read with in 2020 as well, because I read with this one quite a lot. So those are my top 5 new to me decks in 2020. The Spirit Keepers Tarot, my 1972 Blushing Fool, my Tarot of the Cloisters, and then my Modern Witch and my Afro Goddess Tarot Arcanas. So those are my favourite of my new tarot decks. So just to finish off this top 5 of 2020, I have mentioned that the Afro Goddess Tarot Arcanas and the Modern Witch were 2 of the decks that I read with the most in 2020. And I just want to show you the other decks, and what would be my top 5 decks I've read with the most. Because some of them are decks that I didn't buy in 2020. Because as I mentioned at the start, this was supposed to be a depth year as opposed to being the year I've spent more money on tarot decks than ever before. But in the first half of the year, I used decks that I bought last year or previously. And one of the decks I used for a full month to do readings with that I really liked working with was the Herb Crafters Tarot. And this is a mass market US Games deck, and it's created by Letitia Guthrie, and the artwork is by Joanna Powell Colbert. So they made this deck together, and the art is just absolutely beautiful. I don't normally go for non-figurative decks, and this with, each card being represented by a herb is really quite outside my comfort zone. But the Gaian Tarot by Joanna Powell Colbert is my favourite, or one of my all-time favorite tarot decks. And so this was one that I really wanted to get and work with. The guidebook that comes with it is really lovely, and it has tips for working with, you know, the herb that they've chosen for the card, and then as well as the meaning, there's some tips to work with it. And there's a really nicely thought out system as to how they selected and how they depicted the herbs for each of the arcana. So this is one of the top decks that I worked with in 2020, and that is the Herb Crafters Tarot from US Games. That's what the box looks like. Another deck that was one of my top decks to work with in 2020 is this one. So this lives in this lovely little bag that matches it perfectly, because the box I think is too chunky. I don't like the two sections in the box. This is the Light Sears Tarot by Chris Ann Donnelly, and like look at that. Look at that color match. The bag I think is by Soulless Creations on Etsy. So this deck is the independently produced version. As you can see, it's got that lovely green edging. And I worked with this again for about a month. And I think I have posted a full review of this on my channel. The one thing I don't really like about this deck is the cardstock's a little bit thick and a wee bit clumpy to shuffle. But everything else about it is just divine. It's really colourful, it's figurative, it's Rider-Waite-Smith based enough so that it's easy to read straight out of the box, although it does come with a nice guidebook. I would really love to live in this deck. Like, the people are just so cool. Like, it's kind of beautiful, colourful, floaty fabrics, kind of boho style. Like, this is very aspirational. I think this deck, everybody is incredibly attractive looking. It's a diverse cast of characters. And yeah, it's a lovely deck. It's an easy deck to work with, and has been one of my favourites to work with in 2020. And last but not least, a deck that I worked with quite a bit in 2020 is the Story Medicine Tarot, and this is by Jessica Zinchuk. And fair warning, there is nudity on these cards, female nudity. So this deck I came across because of Cassia Tarot Map had done interviews with the creator and has, photographs it quite a lot on her Instagram channel and so on. This is, I think, available from Game Crafter, but again, I bought it from Little Red Tarot in the UK. So it comes with this little mini guidebook, which it has quite an unusual system in how the cards are tied together with a story, and then the meanings for the cards, like one suit of minor arcana and a number of majors, are associated together with the one story. So this is a deck that I've used sort of, I had it for a long time on my bedside table, and I would pull one or two cards from it at night time just to maybe reflect on my day or reflect on the card and just get to know the deck. So there's still quite a lot for me to do in terms of getting to know this deck and working with it properly. But it's a really unusual deck in that it's so focused on this sort of very unique vision of the creator and the stories that go with it, and how she sort of, in this deck anyway, to me, is exploring this sort of embodied experience of like living in a female body. So this is one that has been, at times confronting and challenging to explore, but definitely one of the most interesting and decks that I've worked with the most over 2020. So I realize I've cheated a lot in this video and shown way more than what I was supposed to. I was only supposed to show 5, but so just a quick recap. My top 5 new decks, new to me and new in 2020, were the Painted Tarot, the Shimmering Veil, and Tarot of the Divine. But those were only the decks that were newly published in 2020. My top 5 decks that were new to me in 2020, but not published this year, were the Modern Witch Tarot, the Spirit Keepers Tarot, my Blushing Fool, my Tarot of the Cloisters, and my Afro Goddess Tarot Arcanas. And then the decks that I have read with the most in 2020 where the Modern Witch, the Afro Goddess Tarot Arcanas, and the Herb Crafters Tarot, the Light Sears Tarot, and the Story Medicine Tarot. So thank you if you've persevered with me all this time. Thank you for watching. And I would love to, if anybody has got, I know a lot of people are doing the response to Simon with their top 5 decks of 2020. But if anybody has like a different story for the decks they read the most with in 2020, I would be really interested to hear in the comments. And if you've done your top 5 of 2020, do let me know in the comments so I can go and check it out in case I haven't seen it yet. Because I really am enjoying so much seeing everybody's different tastes and all the different treasures that people have got this year. If you're watching this and you are not in a position to buy a whole load of new decks, I just want to say, you know, I had one tarot deck for, I don't know, 15 years at least. And, you know, this is the only time in my life, I mean, I'm in my 40s now, this is the first time I've ever been in a position financially where I could have bought all of these decks for myself, especially things like, you know, the out of print decks that I've shown you today. You know, you don't need to have all of those decks to be a good tarot reader. And a deck like this, which is, you know, mass market and not too expensive, you know, has been one of my absolute favorites of the year. You know, so you don't need to be able to buy a $50 independently produced deck or whatever to be a good tarot reader. And I am, you know, this year it has been something that I've really, really enjoyed in this difficult, hard pandemic year. You know, the pleasure of buying and enjoying new decks has been one of the things that has really been, you know, one of the upsides of this year for me. But as I say, there's almost been no time in the past where I would have been in a financial position to do this. And I'm just very fortunate right now. So please, if you are not in that position right now, you know, don't think that you can't be a great tarot reader, because you can be a great tarot reader with just one deck. But if you have been enjoying the collecting and the getting of new decks this year, and if it has been part of your 2020, absolutely let me know what your top 5 are down below, and I will come and check it out. So thanks for watching, folks, and I'm sure there'll be like a postscript video coming between Christmas and the New Year if I get any more fabulous goodies for Christmas. Okay, bye.